Most people think the Mafia only deals in lead and blood. But in the winter of 2019, inside the most exclusive underground club in Chicago, a war was started over a waltz. You are about to hear the true, unvarnished account of Sienna Miller, a nobody waitress with holes in her shoes, and Lorenzo, the butcher, Ricci. It started as a cruel joke, a bored Don challenging a terrified girl to a dance that was supposed to humiliate her. He told her, laughing in front of his lieutenants, "If you can dance this waltz without missing a step, I'll marry you." He expected her to fall. He expected her to beg. He didn't know that he had just handed a loaded weapon to the only woman capable of pulling the trigger. This is the story of the wedding of blood and velvet. The floor of the onyx room was made of imported Italian marble, black as a sin, and slick enough to kill you if you weren't careful. For Sienna, it was a minefield. It was 1 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. The air in the private club smelled of stale cigar smoke, expensive cologne, and fear. Sienna adjusted the waistband of her uniform, which was 2 sizes too big, and gripped the silver tray until her knuckles turned white. She wasn't supposed to be on the VIP floor. That was usually reserved for the models, girls who were paid to laugh at bad jokes. But one of the regular servers, a girl named Beatrice, had overdosed in the bathroom an hour ago, and management needed a body. "Eyes down, mouth shut," the floor manager, a sweaty man named Gorbachev, had hissed at her. "Table 4 is the Ricci family. If you spill so much as a drop of water, don't bother coming back. Just run." Sienna knew who they were. Everyone in the north side knew the Ricci brothers. They didn't just run the unions. They owned the concrete the city was built on. At the center of table 4 sat Lorenzo Ricci, Enzo. He didn't look like the monsters on the news. He looked worse. He was arguably handsome, wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than Sienna's entire life earnings. But his eyes were dead. They were the color of frozen espresso, scanning the room with a bored, predatory detachment. To his right sat his younger, more volatile brother, Nico, and to his left, his consigliere, an old man named Arthur Penhaligon. Sienna approached the table. The conversation died instantly. That was the rule. When the help arrives, the business stops. "Refill," Nico grunted, shoving his glass forward without looking at her. Sienna stepped forward. She was tired. She had been working a double shift at the diner before coming here, and her brother's debt collectors had been banging on her apartment door that morning. Her hands shook. Just a micro-tremor. It was enough. As she poured the 1996 Chateau Margaux, Nico slammed his fist on the table, laughing at something Arthur said. The vibration rattled the tray. The bottle slipped. Time seemed to warp. Sienna watched in horror as a stream of blood-red wine arced through the air and splashed across the pristine white cuff of Lorenzo Ricci's shirt. Silence. Absolute, vacuum-sealed silence. The music in the club didn't stop, but the world around table 4 did. Gorbachev, the manager, looked like he was about to have a stroke by the kitchen doors. Nico stood up so fast his chair toppled over. "You stupid bitch," he roared, his hand going to his hip where the bulge of a pistol sat. "Do you know how much that shirt costs?" Sienna didn't move. She couldn't. She was frozen, staring at the stains spreading on Lorenzo's cuff. She waited for the hit. She waited to be dragged out to the alley. "Sit down, Nico," Lorenzo said. His voice was quiet, a low baritone that vibrated through the floorboards. He didn't look at his brother. He was looking at Sienna. He picked up a napkin and dabbed at the stain, his expression unreadable. "Well, you have steady hands usually, don't you?" Lorenzo asked, looking up at her. Sienna swallowed dryly. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll pay for the cleaning." The table erupted in laughter. It was a cruel, barking sound. Even the bodyguards chuckled. "The cleaning?" Lorenzo smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "This is bespoke silk, sweetheart. You couldn't afford the thread." He leaned back, swirling his own glass. He looked bored again. The spilled wine wasn't a tragedy. It was just another tedious event in a tedious life. Tell me, what is your name? Sienna, she whispered. Sienna. Well, Sienna, you ruined my night. I despise incompetence. Usually I'd have you fired, or worse. He gestured vaguely with his hand. But I'm feeling generous. Entertainment is scarce these days. The band in the corner had shifted. They began playing a complex, haunting orchestral piece, Shostakovich's Waltz No. 2. It was a strange choice for a mob club, a request from the old consigliere, Arthur. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed as he heard the music. A thought seemed to strike him, a cruel spark of amusement. He looked at Sienna's worn-out shoes. They were cheap black sneakers, but he noticed how she stood, feet turned out slightly, posture rigid despite the fear. You stand like a dancer, Lorenzo observed. Sienna stiffened. I used to be. Ballet? Ballroom, she corrected before she could stop herself. Lorenzo laughed, a dry, sharp sound. Ballroom. How quaint. He stood up, towering over her. He was over 6'2", radiating a heat that smelled of gunpowder and expensive soap. He gestured to the empty dance floor. Here is the deal, Sienna. You humiliated me by dirtying my suit. Now you will entertain me. Dance. Excuse me? She breathed. Dance to this. He pointed a finger at the band. The waltz. Alone. If you can finish the song without tripping, without looking like a fool, and entertain my men, you walk away with $5,000. The table went quiet. 5,000 was a fortune. And if I fall? Sienna asked, her voice trembling. Lorenzo grinned, showing white, predatory teeth. Then you belong to me. You work off the debt of the shirt in my private kitchen. For free. For a year. It was a slave contract. She knew it. He knew it. I can't dance alone, she said. A waltz requires a partner. Then imagine one, Nico sneered. Sienna looked at the exit. The bouncers were blocking it. She looked at Lorenzo. He was mocking her, treating her like a court jester. He expected her to flail, to cry, to run. She looked down at her sneakers. She thought about the $40,000 debt her brother, Toby, had left behind when he vanished. She thought about the eviction notice. Sienna looked up, her chin lifting. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard anger. I don't want 5,000, she said clearly. Lorenzo blinked. The room went silent again. Greedy little thing, aren't you? What do you want? If I dance this, Sienna said, her voice ringing out, and I don't miss a step, you marry me. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. Then Lorenzo threw his head back and laughed. It was a genuine, roaring laugh that shook his shoulders. The men joined in, wiping tears from their eyes. The absurdity of it. The waitress and the Don. You have guts, I'll give you that, Lorenzo said, wiping his eyes. He stepped closer, leaning down until his lips brushed her ear. Fine. If you dance this waltz to perfection, I'll put a ring on your finger and make you the Queen of Chicago. But when you stumble, Sienna, I'm going to break you. He waved his hand at the band. Play it louder. The conductor, a nervous man named Mr. Klein, tapped his baton. The opening bars of Shostakovich's Waltz No. 2 began, a mournful, rhythmic saxophone drifting over the heavy beat of the strings. Lorenzo sat back down, lighting a cigar. He watched the girl with the amusement of a man watching a bug struggle in a spider web. He expected her to sway awkwardly. He expected a clumsy shuffle. Sienna closed her eyes. For the last 3 years, she had been Sienna the waitress. She had scrubbed toilets, taken verbal abuse, and hidden in the shadows. But before her brother's gambling addiction destroyed their family, she was Sienna Vane. At 17, she had been the youngest Blackpool finalist in a decade. She didn't just know how to dance, she knew how to breathe music. She took a breath, centered her weight, and opened her eyes. They weren't fearful anymore. They were glazed over, focused on something only she could see. She raised her arms, framing an invisible partner. When she took the first step, the mood at table 4 shifted. It wasn't a walk, it was a glide. Despite the rubber soles of her cheap sneakers, she moved across the marble as if she were on ice. A waltz is a dance of rotation and pendulum swing, a difficult balance of momentum and control. Doing it solo is agonizingly hard because you have no counterweight. You have to create the illusion of physics that aren't there. Sienna spun. Her dirty apron flared out. She wasn't dancing for Lorenzo. She was dancing for the ghost of her past. She executed a reverse turn, her head snapping with precise, sharp spotting. Her frame remained rigid, her right hand resting on the shoulder of a phantom, her left hand clasped in the air. Nico's mouth fell open slightly. He stopped drinking. Lorenzo didn't move. The cigar smoke curled around his face, forgotten. He was a man who studied movement. He knew how men moved when they were lying, when they were fighting, when they were dying. He had never seen movement like this. It was mathematically perfect. The music swelled, the brass kicking in. The tempo increased. Sienna accelerated. She swept across the floor, her feet moving in a blur of complex footwork. Chassis, whisks, wing movements. She covered the entire length of the dance floor, whirling like a dervish, yet her upper body remained completely still, floating in the air. She was beautiful. Not in the way the club girls were beautiful with their makeup and surgery. She was raw, kinetic energy. She imagined the invisible partner was Lorenzo. She imagined dragging him into her world, forcing him to keep up. She spun faster, the centrifugal force threatening to throw her off balance, but she locked her core and held the line. The song neared its crescendo, the final dizzying fleckerals. Fast, rotary turns in the center of the floor. Sienna spun. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The world blurred into streaks of gold and black. Her legs burned. Her lungs screamed. But she didn't falter. The final note hit, a sharp, orchestral crash. Sienna stopped instantly, a perfect freeze. Her chest heaved, sweat trickling down her temple. Her arm was still extended, her hand resting on the air where a shoulder should be. She held the pose for 3 seconds, letting the silence settle. Then she dropped her arms, turned to table 4, and curtsied. A low, formal, mocking curtsy. The club was dead silent. Even the bartenders had stopped pouring. Lorenzo Ricci slowly crushed his cigar into the crystal ashtray. He didn't smile. He didn't laugh. He looked like a man who had just realized the gun in his hand was pointed the wrong way. He stood up. The scraping of his chair echoed. He walked onto the dance floor, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. He stopped 2 inches from her. She could smell the tobacco and the sharp, metallic scent of his anger. Or was it fascination? He reached out and took her chin in his hand. His grip was firm, his fingers rough. He tilted her face up to the light. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Sienna," she said, not backing down. "Sienna who?" "Does it matter?" I didn't miss a step. Lorenzo stared at her. He looked at her pulse beating in her neck. He looked at the defiance in her eyes. For 10 years, since he took over the family from his father, Lorenzo had been surrounded by people who feared him or wanted to use him. He had never met anyone who challenged him. He released her chin. He turned to his table. "Arthur," Lorenzo called out. The old consigliere stood up. "Yes, Don Ricci?" "Prepare the car and call Judge Calloway. Wake him up." Sienna felt her stomach drop. "What?" Lorenzo turned back to her, a terrifyingly serious expression on his face. "I'm a man of my word, Sienna. You danced the waltz. You didn't stumble." He buttoned his jacket. "Let's go. We have a wedding license to sign." Nico jumped up. "Enzo, are you crazy? She's a waitress. It was a joke." "I don't joke about debts, Nico," Lorenzo said coldly. "She won. And I never welsh on a bet." He offered his arm to Sienna. "Shall we, my dear? Or are you the one who is afraid now?" Sienna stared at his arm. This was insanity. He was going to kill her. This was just a new way to torture her. But then she thought of the debt collectors. She thought of her empty life. She reached out and took his arm. "I'm not afraid of you," she lied. "Good," Lorenzo whispered as he led her past the stunned crowd, "because you have no idea what you've just walked into." The marriage lasted exactly 6 minutes. It happened in the back office of a corrupted city clerk in the South Loop, a man named Henderson, who smelled of gin and accepted a thick envelope of cash from Arthur. There were no vows, no rings, just signatures on a document that legally bound Sienna Vane to Lorenzo Ricci. As soon as the ink was dry, the atmosphere changed. The playful energy of the club was gone. Lorenzo didn't look at her. He walked out of the office, got into the back of his armored SUV, and waited for her to follow. The drive to his estate was silent. Sienna sat pressed against the door, watching the city lights blur by. She realized, with dawning horror, that she hadn't just married a man. She had been absorbed by a corporation. "You're hyperventilating," Lorenzo said, not looking up from his phone. "I'm not," Sienna snapped, though she was. "Where are we going?" "Home, my home, which is now your home." "For how long? When do we get the annulment?" Lorenzo finally looked at her. The streetlights cast sliding shadows across his face. "Annulment? There is no annulment, Sienna. In my world, divorce is messy, usually fatal. You can't be serious. You did this to prove a point to your brother." "I did this," Lorenzo said, locking his phone, "because 5 minutes before you spilled that wine, I received a text message. The Rossi family, my rivals, are planning to hit me within the week. They think I'm weak because I have no heir and no wife. They think I'm unstable." He leaned forward, his eyes cold. "By marrying you, a civilian, I look unpredictable. I look like I don't care about their threats. You are a shield, Sienna, a distraction." "I'm a target," she whispered. "That too." The car pulled up to a massive iron gate. The Ricci estate was a fortress in Lake Forest, surrounded by high walls and patrolling guards with assault rifles. When they entered the foyer, it was cold and grand, filled with stolen art and marble statues. "Nico will show you to your room," Lorenzo said, checking his watch. "Dinner is at 8. Do not be late. And Sienna?" She turned. "Burn those sneakers. You're a Ricci now. We don't wear rubber." The first week was a nightmare of isolation. Sienna was given a bedroom the size of her old apartment, filled with clothes that fit perfectly, which meant he had sized her up instantly. She saw Lorenzo only at dinner. They ate at opposite ends of a 30-foot table. He spoke little, mostly barking orders at Arthur or taking calls in Italian. But Sienna wasn't idle. She was observant. She noticed the guards rotated shifts every 4 hours. She noticed that Lorenzo never slept more than 3 hours a night. She could hear him pacing in the study below her room. She also realized she was a prisoner. Her phone had been taken. The internet was monitored. On the 7th day, the reality of her situation came crashing down. She was in the library, trying to find a book to distract herself, when she heard voices in the hallway. It was Nico and Arthur. "We can't keep her here forever. Enzo knows that," Nico was arguing. "Once the Rossi heat dies down, we need to get rid of her. A waitress can't be the Don's wife. It makes us look like a joke." "Enzo has a plan," Arthur replied soothingly. "Does he? Or is he just keeping a pet? The moment the Rossis make a move, she's a liability. We should just stage an accident now and be done with it." Sienna's blood ran cold. She backed away, knocking into a small side table. A porcelain vase wobbled. She caught it, but the sound of her gasp was enough. The door swung open. Nico stood there, his face twisting into a sneer. "Well, well, the little waitress is eavesdropping." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "You think you're smart, don't you? Dancing your way into the family?" "Stay away from me," Sienna warned, backing up until she hit the desk. "Or what? You'll waltz at me?" Nico laughed. He pulled a switchblade from his pocket, flicking it open. He didn't intend to kill her, just to scare her. to put her in her place. Enzo isn't here to save you right now. He's at a meeting. He lunged. It was clumsy. Nico was a brawler, used to people cowering. He wasn't used to someone with the proprioception of an elite dancer. Sienna didn't think. She moved. She pivoted on her left heel, a sharp backward lock step, causing Nico to slash at empty air. As he stumbled forward, off balance, she used his momentum. She stepped into his space, grabbed his wrist, and used her hip as a fulcrum. A move from the tango, adapted for survival. She threw him. Nico crashed into the heavy oak bookshelf. Books rained down on him. He groaned, more shocked than hurt, dropping the knife. "What the hell is going on here?" The voice was thunder. Lorenzo stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 guards. He looked at Nico on the floor, then at Sienna, who was breathing hard, her hair wild, standing over his brother. "He tried to cut me," Sienna said, her voice shaking but defiant. Lorenzo looked at Nico. "Is this true?" "She's crazy," Nico spat, scrambling up. "I was just teaching her respect." Lorenzo walked into the room. He didn't look at Nico. He walked straight to Sienna. He stopped a foot away. He reached out and took her hand. Not the one he had grabbed at the club, but the one that had thrown his brother. He inspected her fingers. "You have excellent balance," Lorenzo murmured. "I told you," she said. "I know how to handle a partner who leads poorly." For the first time, a genuine emotion flickered in Lorenzo's eyes. It wasn't amusement. It was respect. He turned to Nico. "Get out. If you touch her again, I will take your hand. Enzo, she is my wife. Get out." Nico stormed out. The silence returned. "You have enemies in this house," Lorenzo said quietly. "I noticed. You need to learn to defend yourself properly. Dancing won't stop a bullet." "Then teach me," Sienna said. "If I'm going to be a target, I want to shoot back." Lorenzo studied her. He saw the fire in her. He realized then that he hadn't just married a distraction. He had married a weapon. "Meet me in the gym at 5 a.m., Lorenzo said. "Wear the sneakers." The basement of the Ricci estate was not a dungeon. It was a state-of-the-art tactical range. For the next 3 weeks, this was Sienna's world. Her instructor was a man named Kalen, a former SAS operative who spoke in grunts and clicked his tongue when she missed. But Lorenzo was the one who oversaw the sessions. He would stand on the observation deck, arms crossed, watching her every move. "You're overthinking the recoil," Lorenzo called out one morning, his voice echoing off the concrete. Sienna lowered the Glock 19. Her arms ached. "It kicks harder than I expected." Lorenzo walked down the stairs. He didn't wear his usual suit. He was in tactical gear, a black t-shirt that showed the roadmap of scars on his arms. He stood behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his chest. "It's like a partner lift," he murmured, his hands covering hers on the grip. "If you fight the weight, you fall. You have to absorb it. Let the energy travel through your arms, down your spine, and into the floor. Ground yourself." He adjusted her stance, kicking her heels apart. "Use your dancer's core. Lock it." Sienna took a breath. She visualized the gun not as a weapon, but as an extension of her frame, like a handhold in a tango. She squeezed the trigger. Bang, bang. 2 shots, dead center in the paper target's chest. "Better," Lorenzo said, his breath ghosting against her neck. He didn't pull away immediately. For a moment, they stood frozen in that intimate, violent embrace. The tension between them had shifted from hostility to something electric, dangerous. "You learn fast," he said, stepping back, "which is good, because tonight you make your debut." Debut? The mayor's charity gala. Every shark in Chicago will be there, including the Rossi family. We are going to walk in there, hand in hand, and show them that the Ricci family is not fracturing. We are expanding. The gala was held at the Field Museum, beneath the towering skeleton of a T-Rex. It was a sea of black ties and diamonds, a playground for the city's corrupt elite. Sienna wore a gown of emerald green silk, backless and dangerous, with a slit that went up to her thigh. It was designed to distract, and it worked. When she walked in on Lorenzo's arm, heads turned. The whispers started immediately. "Who is she? Is that the waitress? No. Look at how she walks. She must be royalty." "Smile," Lorenzo whispered, his hand firm on the small of her back. "They are looking for fear. Give them ice." Sienna lifted her chin. She scanned the room, not as a guest, but as a predator, a habit she had picked up from Lorenzo. She saw Senator Harrison laughing too loudly near the bar. She saw the chief of police accepting a thick envelope from a construction magnate. And then she saw him. Marco Rossi, the head of the rival family. He was an older man, bloated and jovial, looking like a grandfather, but his eyes were reptilian. He approached them, flanked by two men who bulged out of their tuxedos. "Lorenzo!" Rossi boomed, opening his arms. "And the new bride. We heard the rumors, but I didn't believe Enzo had finally settled down." "Marco," Lorenzo nodded, his body tensing imperceptibly. "This is Sienna." Rossi took Sienna's hand, kissing it with wet, cold lips. "Charmed. You must be a special woman to tame the butcher." "I don't tame him," Sienna said smoothly, her voice steady. "I just keep him entertained." Rossi laughed, but his eyes narrowed. He leaned in closer to Lorenzo. "Enjoy the honeymoon, Enzo. It's a shame it will be so short. The city is changing. New management is coming." It was a threat, plain and simple. As Rossi walked away, Sienna felt a strange vibration. She looked at the crowd. Something was wrong. The rhythm of the room had shifted. The waiters were moving too fast. The music, a string quartet playing Vivaldi, seemed to clash with the frantic energy she sensed. She looked at the balcony. A waiter was standing there, holding a tray. But he wasn't looking at the guests. He was looking at Lorenzo, and his hand was reaching under the tray. "Down!" Sienna screamed. She didn't think. She threw her weight against Lorenzo, tackling him. It was a move from the jive, a sudden, explosive drop. Crack! A bullet shattered the champagne flute Lorenzo had been holding a millisecond before. Chaos erupted. Screams, glass breaking. The waiter on the balcony pulled a submachine gun, spraying the floor. "Move!" Lorenzo roared, dragging Sienna behind a marble pillar. His security team returned fire, the museum turning into a war zone. "You saved me," Lorenzo said, looking at her, his eyes wide with shock. He was bleeding from a graze on his cheek, but he looked alive, exhilarated. "I saw his shift," Sienna gasped. "He broke the rhythm." "Stay here," Lorenzo commanded, pulling his own weapon from a hidden holster. "No," Sienna said, grabbing his arm. She pointed to the east exit. "Rossi's men are blocking the main doors. They want to box us in. We have to go through the kitchen." Lorenzo looked at her. In that moment, she wasn't the waitress. She was his consigliere. "Lead the way, Mrs. Ricci," he said. They ran. They moved together, covering each other's blind spots. When a gunman popped out from behind a display case, Lorenzo dropped him with a single shot. When they reached the kitchen and a busboy lunged with a knife, Sienna kicked his knee out and slammed his head into the counter. They burst out into the alleyway, where Arthur was already waiting with the car, tires screeching. As they sped away into the night, Lorenzo didn't let go of her hand. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a heavy, undeniable realization. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "You're not a shield," he whispered into the darkness. "You're the only thing keeping me alive." That night, in the safety of the fortress, there were no separate rooms. The marriage was consummated not out of duty, but out of a desperate, fiery need to affirm they were still alive. 3 months passed. The war with the Rossi family had turned into a stalemate of car bombs and drive-by shootings. Sienna had become a fixture at Lorenzo's side. She sat in on meetings, she managed the books, her math skills from managing her meager waitress tips translating surprisingly well to money laundering. But the happiness was fragile. It broke on a Tuesday. Sienna was in the garden, practicing her aim, when Nico came running out. He looked pale. "It's Toby," he said. Sienna dropped the gun. My brother? We found him. The Rossis. They have him. They sent a video. He handed her a tablet. On the screen, Toby was tied to a chair, beaten and bloody. A masked man held a gun to his head. A voice distorted by software spoke. Bring the girl to the old shipyards at midnight. Come alone, or the boy dies. Sienna felt the world tilt. She ran to Lorenzo's office. He was already watching the video, his face grim. We have to go, Sienna said. It's a trap, Sienna, Lorenzo said, not looking up. A classic pincer movement. They want to draw me out. If I go there, I die. If you go there, you die. He's my brother. He's a junkie who sold you out. Lorenzo slammed his fist on the desk. Who do you think told them how to get into the gala? Who do you think gave them the layout? Sienna froze. What? We found transfers, Lorenzo said, his voice softer now. Toby sold information on your movements to Rossi for 10 grand. He caused the hit. I don't believe you, she whispered. Look at the files. Lorenzo tossed a folder at her. Sienna flipped through them. Bank statements, texts. It was all there. Her brother had sold her life for a fix. I don't care, Sienna said, tears streaming down her face. He's still my blood. I can't let them execute him. If you go, Lorenzo said, his voice turning cold, you go without my protection. I will not risk my men for a traitor. I will not risk the family. Then I go alone. If you walk out that door, Sienna, you are no longer a Ricci. You're just a waitress again. It was an ultimatum. The Empire or the blood. Sienna looked at the man she had fallen in love with. She saw the pain in his eyes. He wanted her to stay. He was begging her to choose him. But she couldn't let Toby die. I'm sorry, Enzo, she whispered. She turned and walked out. She expected him to stop her. He didn't. The heavy oak doors slammed shut, echoing like a gunshot. Sienna took a beat-up sedan from the garage and drove to the shipyards. It was a desolate wasteland of rusted containers and fog. She walked to the center of the designated warehouse, her hands raised. I'm here, she screamed. Oh, let him go. Floodlights blinded her. Marco Rossi stepped out from behind a container, clapping slowly. Toby was there, slumped in a chair. So touching, Rossi sneered. The sisterly bond. You know, I didn't think you'd come. Lorenzo is smart. I thought he'd keep you on a leash. Let him go, Sienna repeated. Oh, we will. Rossi nodded to a goon. The man cut Toby's bonds. Toby scrambled up, looking terrified. He ran towards Sienna. I'm sorry, Si, I'm sorry, he blubbered. It's okay, she hugged him. We're leaving. Not exactly.